what is heritage? It seems like a simple question, right? But trust me, once you start digging, it gets really fascinating and honestly pretty political. My goal here is to break down the key ideas from this chapter for you. In just a few minutes, we're going to go through this slide by slide.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to challenge the basic idea of what heritage even is. Then we'll get into this tension between the official, top-down heritage and the stuff that matters to real communities. After that, we'll look at who actually gets to decide what's important, which is a huge deal. Then we'll cover the big criticisms of the so-called heritage industry. And finally, we'll put it all together to get to what heritage really is. Let's do this.
Okay, first things first. Let's tackle that big question right at the top. When we talk about heritage, what are we really talking about? You might think you know, but it's way more interesting than just a bunch of old stuff. Okay, take a look at these two. On the left, you've got the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, a completely natural wonder. And on the right, the Mir Castle in Belarus, totally man-made, full of history. Now here's the kicker. They are both official UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So, one's nature, one's a building, they're on opposite sides of the planet. What's the connection? What makes them both heritage? Well, the easy answer is to just check the dictionary, right? And it tells us heritage is basically property we inherit. Valuable things like historic buildings passed down from the past. Simple, clear, and, as we're about to see, totally incomplete. It barely scratches the surface.
Right, because here's where the chapter really turns things on their head. It argues that heritage isn't something we just find lying around. It's actually an active process. It's a choice that we make, right now in the present, about what parts of the past are worth holding on to. And that choice, well, it's always political.
And that leads us straight to this really crucial idea you need to grasp for the test. There's this fundamental split in how heritage works. You see, not all heritage is created equal. There's a huge difference between what the people in charge say is important and what actually matters to people on the ground. So let's break that down. You've got official heritage. This is the top-down stuff. It's when the state or big organizations like UNESCO point at something and say, that is important. It's formal, it's institutional. But then you have unofficial heritage. And that's bottom-up. It's the memories, the stories, the places that are important to a family or a community, whether or not there's a plaque on the wall. And, these two can definitely be in conflict.
And look at this. Even the official gatekeepers are starting to get it. UNESCO now recognizes that heritage is so much more than just buildings. They talk about intangible heritage, the living stuff you can't always touch, like oral traditions, festive events, music, even traditional sports. This is huge. It shows that heritage isn't just a thing, it's something people do. So this all builds to the next big question, and it's a critical one. If heritage is chosen and not just found, then who gets to do the choosing? This is where the politics really kick in.
Now, the chapter gives us a key term for this. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's super important. The authorized heritage discourse, or AHD. Think of it as the official language of heritage. It's the set of rules and ideas that experts, academics, and government officials use to decide what counts, what's valuable, and how it should be taken care of. It's the language of power.
And you can see that AHD in action right here. Becoming a World Heritage Site doesn't just happen. It's a highly political, bureaucratic process. First, a country has to nominate a place. Then, a bunch of international experts have to check it out. And finally, a committee made up of 21 different countries has to vote. It's pure politics.
So what this whole process creates is what the chapter calls a canon. Like how in English class you have a canon of great books? Well, this is the official list of great places and great things. And since it's mostly controlled by the state, that canon is always going to reflect the history and the values of the people in power.
Okay, so if the government and experts have all this power to choose, what's the downside? Well, this is where the critique of heritage gets really sharp, and it's something you'll definitely want to know for the test. A huge concept here is the heritage industry. This term was coined by a guy named Rodney Harrison, and his argument was that we're turning heritage into a product. We're commercializing it, cleaning it up, making it neat and tidy, and basically selling a nice, nostalgic version of the past to make ourselves feel better about the messy present.
And this is his most famous quote. It's such a powerful image. He's saying our obsession with perfectly preserving the past is like putting it under a glass bell jar. Nothing new can get in, and no new ideas can get out. It basically freezes us, preventing us from dealing with today's problems and imagining a different future.
And check this out. This chart just shows you the heritage industry in action.
It's tracking the number of official policy documents about heritage. Just look at that insane jump starting in the 1960s. That's not just history. That's the growth of a bureaucracy, an industry, right there in those bars. And if you want a perfect picture of what Hewison was talking about, this is it. The gift shop at the end of the King Tut exhibit. Think about it. Your profound historical experience conveniently ends in a place where you can buy a keychain. This is the commercialization of the past, plain and simple.
Okay, so we've torn apart the simple definition, we've looked at who holds the power, and we've heard the big critiques. So where does that leave us? Let's try to put all the pieces back together and build a smarter, more useful understanding of what heritage really is.
The chapter hits us with this really provocative, kind of mind-blowing idea, which is that technically there is no such thing as heritage. Now, what does that mean? It means that nothing is inherently heritage. No building or object is just born important.
And this right here, this is the single most important takeaway from this entire chapter. If you remember one thing, make it this. The old way of thinking was that heritage has intrinsic value, that a place is just important on its own and we just have to discover it. But the new critical view says no, value is attributed. A place becomes important because we, in the present, choose to give it value. Heritage isn't discovered, it is created.
And so that leaves us with this final, really powerful question. If heritage isn't something we find, but something we make, then that puts all the responsibility on us, right here, right now. The things we choose to remember, the stories we choose to tell, they say everything about the kind of world we want to live in today. What will we choose?